Happy Earth Day, everyone. And just so you know, we're on a special Earth Day feed. It's not the usual Fire Drill Friday feed, but that's okay. We may not be able to be together in the streets, but it feels so good to be together online to mark these important days of digital strikes and to lift up the voices of the youth climate activists. It means the world to me that you're here to learn from Vanessa Nakate. I'll be interviewing Vanessa for the first 20 minutes of this call, more or less, and then we'll be taking your questions for those of you who are on the call or from social media. So please write your questions in the chat box, hit return, and we'll do our best to answer as many of them as we can. Vanessa Nakate is a climate activist from Uganda, and she's going to be speaking to us from the capital of Uganda. She was the first Fridays for Future climate activist in her country. And she founded the Rise Up climate movement in order to amplify the voices of activists from Africa. Her work includes raising awareness to the danger of climate change, the causes and the impacts. She spearheaded the Save Congo Rainforest campaign, which is facing massive deforestation. This campaign later spread to other countries from Africa to Europe. And Vanessa is currently working on a project that involves installing solar and institutional stoves in schools. Please welcome a real climate leader, Vanessa Nakate, who comes to us from Kampala, the capital of Uganda. Welcome, Vanessa.
Thank you so much, Jane, for having me.
Tell us what inspired you to become a climate activist.
I remember in the year 2018, I wanted to do something that could cause change in the lives of the people in my community. Therefore, I started carrying out research to understand the problems that the people face. And I found quite a number of problems, like high unemployment rates, especially in people who had just finished school, gender inequalities, but I was really attached to climate change. This is because I had studied about it in school, but I didn't even know that it was a threat because it was taught as something that either happened in the past or something that is coming in the future that I don't have to worry about or anyone else doesn't have to worry about. So I was really moved to read more about climate change, to understand its causes. And I must say, for the first time, I got to know what global warming really means. And yet actually I had seen it in school, but I never really got to know what it means. And then I got to understand the impacts of climate change. And I realized that there were people in my country, especially in the Mount Elgon area, that are suffering as a result of climate change through the changing weather patterns, bringing about short rainy seasons, causing flooding and destruction of everything that they own. So when I realized that this was a problem, I knew at that moment that I had to do something about it. And through more research about other forms of activism and other forms of movements, I got to find out about the Fridays for Future movement. Actually, my father is a Rotarian, and he really inspired me when it comes to, doing something that can help people. So I really got that from him. But then later, when I found out about the Fridays for Future movement started by Greta Thunberg, I really got so inspired by what she was doing and the climate strikes that she was leading. So I decided that I would start the climate movement, that is the Fridays for Future movement in Uganda. And my first strike was in January, the first week, 2019.
Tell us a little bit about what form your activism takes besides the strike.
Well, besides the strikes, I'm also leading a project that involves the installation of solar and institutional stoves in schools, because I believe that being an activist, you need to do more than that. You need to actually bring about the change. And I started this project to help bring eco-friendly stoves to these schools so that they can, first of all, ensure clean cooking for the students, ensure safe food preparation for the chefs, and also reduce on the amount of firewood that is used in the schools. For example, if a school is to use firewood in a term, without the stove, the school will use 5 trucks of firewood. But with the stove, the school will use 2 trucks of firewood. And yes, still they're using firewood, but at least it would have cut down the amount of usage and the amount of trees that are being cut down. And then we are pushing for renewable energy as activists, but not everyone is able to afford this renewable energy, especially in developing countries or low developed countries. For example, in my country, not everyone is able to afford solar installations, especially in schools. It's quite expensive. So I thought that if we really want this transition, then we have to bring these things to the people, because people will not reject them if they come at a free cost. So this is also a project that I'm leading in my activism. Apart from the climate strikes, I also handle this project, which is also a learning process, by the way, for the students, because it gives me an opportunity to speak to them, to speak to their parents, and to speak to their teachers about what climate change really means, not what climate change is taught in schools.
Mm-hmm. And how do you raise money to buy these stoves and solar installations?
Well, I remember when I wanted to start this project, I remember putting it out on Twitter, and a very generous person inboxed me and told me that they would be willing to handle installation of 5 schools. And I was really surprised by that. And I found that that was so generous, and the person really fulfilled what he promised, because so far we've handled 2 schools. We've been able to install the solar systems and the institutional stoves. By this time, we would have finished with 2 more schools, but we are now in a lockdown and schools are shut down. So there is no way the project can continue. But we have someone who is willing to cater for 5 schools, and we have 3 more schools left. But of course, we want to handle as more schools as possible.
Is there a way that you could let us know how people can help with fundraising? Can you put that into the chat box or?
Yeah, I have a donation link. I tried creating a PayPal link, but it's hard to do it from my country. Unfortunately, if you're from Uganda, you can't create a link to receive money, but you can just use PayPal to send money. So it makes it so complicated. So I asked this very person to help me create a link in order to be able to, send it out to the public in case someone would like to donate. And that's something I would be willing to share in the chat.
Okay, that would be great, because I know people that would like to help you. So that's great. But you've also worked out, you were talking about the need to save trees. That's one of the good things about the solar stove. Doesn't require so much wood. But you started a Congo Rainforest protest. Talk about what's happening in the Congo Rainforest and why that's so important.
When I started the Congo Rainforest protest, I remember I was speaking to a certain group of people from Rotary. They had invited me to speak to them, and later on they asked me questions, and one person asked me why people don't care about the forests in Africa. Why is the world only reporting about the Amazon and other forests? That really hit me a lot, and I decided that I needed to start reading more about African forests. I remember I also joined the strikes for the Amazon, the time that the fires were really going crazy. So I read about the Congo Rainforest, and it was exciting to find out the many things that are about it. First of all, 80 million people being able to depend on just this one forest, it being the largest rainforest in Africa, is already exciting enough. And also it has a special species that is only found in that forest. It cannot be found in any other part of the world. It's called the okapi, also known as the forest giraffe. And I thought that if we were to lose this forest, that means we would lose this animal species known as the okapi. And I went more to read about it, and I realized that this forest has minerals like petroleum. And trust me, the fossil fuel industry is so greedy that it is willing to cut down anything just to extract that oil. So I decided that I had to start a campaign to defund deforestation in the forest, even though I've never been there in person. But it's logical enough when you realize that there is a resource like petroleum that would attract any kind of greedy company, especially the fossil fuel company. They go after everything. And I decided that I had to fight for this forest, being that millions of people depend on this forest. This forest has indigenous people. You know, we usually talk about indigenous people, but sometimes I feel like the indigenous people in Africa are left out, and yet there are so many, and they depend on the natural resources that are in Africa. That is why I fight so much for the protection of these forests. And the other thing is, most African countries, they depend on their natural resources. Most water sources come from these forests. Even the Congo Rainforest, most water resources, they come from the Congo forest. So that means that if we lose the forest, we lose the water sources. We already have enough people who can't have access to clean water. But then why put the forests at risk, yet that the sources of some of these streams or of these rivers? That is why I believe it's important for us to protect the natural resources of Africa.
Oh, thank you so much for telling us about that. You know, my research has shown me that in the global South, women are the most impacted by the climate crisis. Do you think this is true? And if so, why?
Well, this is so true, Jen, because in the global South, in most communities, it is the women that are responsible of putting food on the table. It is the women that are responsible of putting water on the table. And climate change, being that it threatens mostly the natural resources, and most African countries being able to depend on only their natural resources. So these women's farms or their crop production is put at a risk when these disasters of climate change strike. That is why I believe women are affected the most when, the climate change disasters happen, because most of their work is put to literally nothing when they lose it as a result of intensity of droughts or torrential rainfall. Many of them lose their farms. But does that mean that the children won't eat? You know how women are, you know how mothers are. They try as much as possible to do whatever they can in order to put food on the table. Well, I've seen that in my family. So women will try as much as possible. They will walk long distances to get water for their families if there are intense dry spells. So women really suffer so much in the issue of climate change. I have seen street children in Kampala, but most of them, they are with their mothers. I never actually see street fathers. I see street mothers and street children. And I always ask myself, why is it always the women? But it's because the women are willing to do anything to provide for their children. If the global temperatures are rising high and their areas are being hit by intensity of droughts, they are forced to migrate, to better places. Well, they think they are better places, only to reach to the city, and they find that they either have to go to the slums or they have to go to the streets in order to beg. And I've really seen how much the women suffer and how much inequality is increased the more climate change happens. In my community, they don't accept women to climb trees or girls to climb trees. So in case of a flood, the first way to save yourself would be climbing a tree, but it is the men who are able to climb the trees. So women are left to either run for safety, but can you even run faster than water? No. So that means that, personally, I believe in every climate disaster or in every flood that happens, if one man dies, 5 women will die because they will try as much as possible to save themselves. I could talk more about how women are affected. Pregnant women, when temperatures are so high, many of them have high risk pregnancies. So they are put at a risk of encountering miscarriages because of the changing temperatures. When you look at single mothers, if they lose everything, for example, to floods or to hurricanes, they are pushed to the streets. They are pushed with nothing. And you know, on the streets, it is the strong that survive. And who are the strong? I have to be honest, you know, physically men seem to be stronger, and on the streets it is the strong who survive, and these women are exposed to physical violence and sexual violence, and all this just comes from one detail, and that is climate change.
And I've heard you talk about the increase of child brides, young, very, very young girls being married off, and that is related to the climate crisis. Can you tell us just a little bit about that?
Yes, I will explain. In most families in Africa, you find that the less privileged families, they tend to have many children. Why? This is because they're trying to have labor that will work in their farms and provide food for their, you know, for their communities or for their families. So in most cases, if these families lose everything, if they experience intense dry spells and they literally have to lose their crops, or if they experience floods and they literally have to lose their crops. I was reading an article today that was talking about 32,000 people displaced in Kenya because of the floods, and over 80 acres of crops destroyed because of floods. So you find that there's in some rural communities, some of these people heavily depend on the crops that they grow. So if they lose everything because of this, they are pushed to make very hard decisions. Of course, not every parent is willing to give up their child for marriage, but they are pushed to a point of, I want to survive. I want other children to survive. I also want this other child to survive. And in Africa, it is the men who pay the bride price. So that also puts an issue of gender inequality, meaning it is the girl child who is given out for marriage because the parents expect something from the newly found husband, and they also reduce on the number of children that they have at home that they have to take care of. So climate change greatly connects with children brides, and it's increasing this. But of course, we don't get coverage of every story of children brides. Most of these things happen in rural communities, and we never really get to know what happens, but we get to know through articles that are written by people who go ahead and visit these places and see what really happens.
Gosh, you know what just breaks my heart open is to hear how women suffer disproportionately because of the climate crisis. And yet in the global South, in Africa in particular, it's also women who are the solutions to the climate crisis. In Lamu Island,
Exactly.
Kenya, for example, women are rising up to stop a coal plant from coming there. Women in Kenya and Tanzania and Rwanda have organized a nationwide ban on plastic bags. And of course, there's the great Kenyan warrior and Nobel Prize winner, Mangari Maathai, who's organized a movement of women who've planted millions of trees. And we also know that in countries where there are more women in parliament, the government is more likely to pass environmental laws and ratify international treaties. So I think one of the things we have to do is make sure that there are more women elected to office, right?
Yeah.
Why do you think that women are at the forefront of finding solutions to the climate crisis?
I think that the reason is as clear as day. They are the most affected. Some of them have experienced these impacts of climate change and they don't want to go through that again. Some of them have seen how their children have had to leave school because they cannot sell more food to try and put their children in school. So I believe women they're at the front line of providing solutions for climate change because they want change. I mean, they don't want to suffer for the rest of their lives. They don't want their daughters to suffer. They don't want their children to suffer. They don't want the next generation to suffer. So I believe women are more involved in finding solutions for climate change, and they are most likely going to pass suitable environmental laws in government because they see the danger that women face in in a case of a climate disaster. That is something that some men fail to see. That is because they have not faced the wrath of climate change, but the women have faced this wrath. They have seen their fellow women face this, and as I know women, they always stand up for each other. That means if I see another woman suffer and I can do something about it, then I'll speak up against that to make sure that their lives are better. So women understand the problems because they have experienced the problems, and they are ready to take any solution that is able to change the situation that they are facing or that any other woman is facing.
Thank you. Tell us if the COVID-19 pandemic has hit Uganda very hard yet, and what is happening there. Has your government been able to enforce social isolation? Are they stepping up?
Well, a lot has really changed in Uganda because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Schools have been closed, churches have been closed, any kind of gatherings have been closed, even barriers that are specific about the number of people who are to attend. That's if you lose someone. But then if you lose someone because of COVID-19, that means you can't even participate in their barriers. So a lot has really changed in Uganda, and there is a lockdown, and shops are locked. It's only shops that sell food products that are accepted to, you know, keep working, because people need to keep getting food and all that. So there's been a lot of change, and the government has been able to bring about social distancing in a way because of every law that they have put up. But then it has not been so positive for everyone. This is because most of the people in Uganda, they depend on daily earnings to survive, you know.
Yeah.
They depend on the money that they make in a day. So most of them are in lockdown. That means they can't earn anymore. They don't know what to provide for their families. So they are being pushed to survive on just probably a meal a day, or eat today and then skip tomorrow and then eat the next day. So literally it's a survival mode for most people, but the government is trying as much as possible to reach out to these people and give them food. But there are so many people, you know, and because climate change has already been affecting the food availability and threatening food insecurity. Now, at a time of this pandemic, climate change just makes everything worse. Food prices are going high at a very fast rate, and only those who are privileged are able to get good food and survive. But most people, those who manage to get something, they're surviving on just maize flour for the period when, you know, the lockdown will end. They're just surviving on maize flour and beans. And yeah, it's really a very serious situation right now. People are trying so much to survive.
Our heart goes out, Vanessa. Thank you for telling us that. I
Thank you
think
so
it's time
much.
now to take questions from our audience. Sam, would you relay the questions to Vanessa?
Yes, Vanessa, this one is from Summer in the Earth Day live chat. What can international allies do to support Ugandan youth fighting fossil fuel and industrial agriculture built out in Uganda and across Africa?
Thank you so much for that question. The best way that you can help Ugandan activists, especially to fight the fossil fuel industry, is by first of all helping them in educating the people. This is because many people do not even connect climate change and the fossil fuel industry. Many people don't realize that the fossil fuel industry is the reason for the climate crisis that we are in right now. And it takes a lot of education, it takes a lot of resources to be able to reach out to these people. Yes, I personally may be able to reach out to some people and, you know, teach them, but I'm able to do that because of the project that I'm working on. I'm able to reach out to students and explain to them what climate change really means and what brings about that, and be able to speak to the teachers as well. But then it takes a lot of resources to reach everyone. So I think the best way that you can help a youth in Uganda to be able to address the fossil fuel industry will be, first of all, maybe by helping in projects or providing resources for them to teach these people. Because the first step is really educating. You cannot tell someone that they're in a climate crisis and it's because of the fossil fuel industry if they don't even get the connection between fossil fuels and climate change. I have to tell you the truth. I've been in school, but I also didn't know the connection between fossil fuels and climate change. I had to get to learn all that through the research that I did. But then if we are able to bring these resources to people and teach them, and also have our own scientists wake up and do something and speak up. We need African scientists to speak up. I can't really hear them, I can't see them, but we need to hear them speak up, because they're the ones to provide facts and help people learn. But then we really don't have those resources. So I think the best way would be helping people access these resources and be able to reach out to the different communities and be able to reach out in schools, because schools is the most effective way of really educating people, because children are always ready to learn what you teach them.
Great, great. And then this one is from Olivia from Twitter. Who are some of your inspirations for your work? You listed Greta as a big influence. Who else have you learned from about your organizing?
Well, I've learned from Jamie Magdalene from Seattle, Washington. I think she's really amazing. She's the founder of Zero Hour. I think she is so powerful in her activism, and she's someone else I've really learned from in the climate movement.
Great. And then this one is coming live from the Earth Day live chat from Natalie. What is your perspective on transitioning from big agriculture and focusing on community, family, small-scale regenerative agriculture and farming practices that can help restore ecosystems?
Yes, I believe that regenerative agriculture and community-based agriculture would be the best thing for the world right now. We are in a we've been exposed, the systems have been exposed by the coronavirus pandemic, clearly showing that people don't really have access to basic needs, but we need new systems that are able to make sure that everyone has access to good food, everyone has access to health facilities, everyone has access to maybe shelter. So I think that community-based solutions and regenerative kind of agriculture, not massive things. I mean, we shouldn't look at accumulating wealth that we are going to end up living in this world. When you die, you don't go with your money, you don't go with your wealth. I think it's better to be more distributive and make sure that everyone is living a comfortable life. That's what really matters.
Great, great. Yeah, definitely that. This one is from Twitter again, from Haley in Palm Springs. Young people can generally be pretty apathetic about getting involved with political work. What have you found to be a successful strategy for recruiting other young people to join your movement?
Well, that has been education, I must say. I believe in the power of education, because if someone knows that they are in a burning house, they will not stay in that house. They will try as much as possible to get out. But if you're in a burning house, and I clearly tell you that you're in a burning house, but you refuse to see that, because I don't have facts, I can't show you the fire, then you won't get out. So I think education is really a very good strategy in getting young people to join the climate movement, because the moment they realize that their future is at stake, they'll try as much as possible to protect that future.
Great. And then this one comes from the Earth Day live chat from Sue. How is the COVID-19 crisis affecting the climate justice movement in Uganda right now?
Well, the only effect that the COVID-19 pandemic has, brought on the climate movement in Uganda or even worldwide is that we cannot go out on the streets anymore. But then that doesn't mean that we are silent. We are still speaking, we are still demanding for action, we are still protesting online. What we did is listen listen to the science. That is what we did in order to protect the people. And that is what more people need to learn. That's what more people need to understand. The leaders need to understand that the only way that we can save lives and be able to protect people from these kinds of pandemics is listen to the facts that are being given. So basically, the climate movement hasn't changed at all. It's even stronger than ever. We've just taken the strikes online.
Great. And then this one also comes from the chat from Summer. How can African and international government / policy makers work to support women farmers in keeping their land and feeding families and communities?
That is by involving them in the conversations that involve their lands. In most cases, these women are not brought to those conversations. In most cases, the leaders decide what they want for these women, but then these women understand clearly how to protect their land. They understand how to grow their crops. They understand how they've been able to protect their resources for a very long time. So the way leaders and leaders either from Africa or internationally can be able to help these women in their activities or in their farming, in their agriculture, is by bringing them on the table. We need more women on the table because they're the solution.
Yes.
Definitely agree with that. All right, this one is from Charlotte. This is from Twitter specifically, Charlotte in Tennessee. A lot of your work is centered on community-based solutions and activism. How do you balance building a local community-centered movement while staying connected with the broader global campaigns?
Well, I think what has really helped me with that is, first of all, social media. Thank God for social media. We are able to reach out to everyone. We are able to connect with everyone. So what I really do, I do the local-based activism while also interacting with the rest of the activists, because they are hope and motivation to us. If you focus on just yourself, sometimes you fail to move forward. They say that they usually say, if you run alone, you will reach far. But if you run with people, you will reach farther. So I believe in the power of unity, in connecting and learning with each other. So usually what I do, of course, I'm in different WhatsApp groups with many activists internationally, Telegram groups. So that's how I keep the conversation moving with activists abroad. If they have any kind of actions, digital actions that they want us to join, we are always ready to join, because we are not separate. We are one. It's one movement. We all have the same demands, the same goals, and we want the same future. That is a better future, a healthier future for everyone.
You've attended a number of the international climate conferences like COP25. That's where I learned about show your hand. Look at you. Yes, my friends with the Sunshine Movement and Fridays for Future, when they came to DC, they drew these eyes on me. Explain to the audience why the eyes. What do they mean?
Well, basically, these eyes just show the leaders and those in the fossil fuel industry that we are watching you. Whatever you do, whatever move you make, we are watching you. We did this action on one of the leaders in the shell company, and trust me, they really freaked out. So these eyes are really magic. They're really magic. So they really scare people out. It's more like telling you, we are watching every move. We are watching the wrong decisions that you're making. We are watching you destroy our future.
Vanessa, I wish I could put my arms around you. And I'm going to have Jess tell you how to reach me when you come to the United States. I want to be able to get together with you. You're so powerful and you're so intelligent. I'm so grateful to you for the work you're doing. Plus, my daughter's name is Vanessa, and I have another daughter who spent 2 years in northern Uganda with the Peace Corps. So we have a lot to talk about. Thank you so much for joining me on this Friday. And to the audience, if you haven't already, text Jane to 877-877. It's quick and easy. It's a way to stay up to date with what we're doing and to find out about opportunities for you to take action at home. You know, we're building a movement for long-term people power, and we need your help. So you can also sign up to be one of our special volunteer teams from home. These teams are so important to us. You can go to firedrillfridays.com/volunteer to get involved. And our volunteers are really being put to work, and we're so grateful. I hope you'll join us. I'll see you next Friday for a virtual Fire Drill Friday rally. To join, you can follow us on social media. That's Fire Drill Friday on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And we'll have information about upcoming fireside fire drill chats and rallies. Stay safe and healthy. Vanessa, you too. Stay safe and healthy. Give my love to your family. And remember, we're not alone.
Yeah.
We may be alone physically, but we're in this together. So thank you for joining us. See you next time.